There is something in the show today/tonight that it was a real attention zapper in the office over the past couple of hours. Probably like the fifth or sixth thing we're going to talk about on the show. It's not even the lead segment. It's not the lead topic or anything. But there is something woven in here a little bit later on that commanded, I don't know, what would you say, Jesse, about an hour and a half's worth of our time today. Complete nonsense. It's fantasy. It will probably never happen unless I'm elected commissioner, which in and of itself has been controversial over the last 24 hours, caused a certain unnamed lead analyst at a certain network I don't work for has been jockeying for the position. More on that in due time, people. But until then, we're jam-packed. We're high atop of glorious downtown Nashville, Tennessee. It is Tuesday night, January 14th, the year of our Lord 2025, and we've got a national championship game to predict. That's why I don't want to lead the show. I don't want to bury the lead. I don't want to lead the show with something that we could put way deeper in the show, but I'm excited about a number of things that we're going to hit on tonight. So Ohio State, Notre Dame, we'll lead the show with it. We'll predict it from every angle. The model has its opinion. I have my opinion. It hasn't been worth much on Notre Dame games lately, but remember, I was on a little cold streak with Washington last year and Michigan, as it turns out. So by default, we redeemed ourselves at the very end. Quick Trip's texting me while I'm on air. Does that mean that they like me a whole lot or don't like me enough to know I'm on air? It's got to be the first one. It can't be the second one. Anyway, what was the golden age of college football? Are we in the golden age of college football? Is the golden age ahead of us in college football? That's not even the topic I'm talking about. That's a whole nother thing we're going to hit tonight because the mailbag overflowed so much the other day, I still have a lot to get to. I've got a controversial question at the end. Clemson's making moves. I do have to talk about that. No, I didn't ignore it. No, I haven't forgotten it. Yes, I will talk about that. So we'll talk about it all. And as usual, we're proudly brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. They are watching us tonight in Rogers, Arkansas, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Pensacola, Florida, and beautiful Cedar Crest, New Mexico. Colin, I think you have relatives there. No, you didn't tell me that. Okay. Well, I'm sure someone does. Someone's relatives have to live there. Listen, I need your sage advice on something as we dive into the show tonight. Let's just say, for argument's sake, that we had the Pate State Speaker Series come back this spring. So that's just where we go all over the country and sit down with coaches. Yeah. But what if we had a series where we sat down with notable figures that were not coaches? Would we want to call that Pate State and Friends? That's option A. Or would we want to call it Freights and Friends? Sort of working off the alliteration there. Mix in Chuggy. That's up to you. My balls are in your court. Immunity. Okay, let's dive into the show tonight. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Ohio State, Notre Dame. Our national championship game is set. It's Monday night. It's in Mercedes-Benz Stadium in the shadow of the assassinated Georgia Dome. 7:30 Eastern kickoff on ESPN. I have in my hand a paper popper of a stat that I had to check Jesse on. He brought it to me, and I said, Jesse, that's not right. Crunch the numbers again. And he said, crunch. He's pressed a button. Same thing. That's how numbers get crunched. The average margin of victory in the college football playoff championship game. The playoff era, the championship game, allegedly the two best teams in the country. What is the average margin of victory in those games? We've been doing this over a decade now. The average margin of victory is 20.1. So you know how everyone always tells you on the morning of a game when you're walking around the tailgate area or you're in Home Depot and you're about to go home and watch the game kick off and you're just making small talk at the gym or something. Someone says, oh, I don't know who's going to win. It'll be a good game, though. It'll be a good game. There's never a guarantee any game's going to be a good game. We score in 3s and 7s. These players are really good. Any game could get lopsided. Case in point, like every championship game. So one of the byproducts of this expanded playoff I'm not crazy about is maybe it filters out the teams that would have been blown out. And maybe we're guaranteed more close games at the end. Maybe. I know that's a working theory amongst many of you. There's a perception, and then there's a reality as we get into this game. So the perception is Ohio State's the heavy favorite, and they are. I agree that they should be. FanDuel right now has the line Ohio State minus 8.5. That's the perception. The perception is Notre Dame's got to do a lot to overcome this. That's the perception I have, too. So I share this. Here's the reality. They met, 14 or 15 months ago. Yeah, I'm pausing. I want to make sure everyone remembers that. They did meet. I was there. Maybe my favorite game I've ever attended, all things included. Weather, venue, atmosphere. It was Ohio State. It was at Notre Dame in South Bend, like 70 degrees, clear blue skies at kickoff. 17-14 was the final. Ohio State won there at the very end. It was like a walk-off, basically. So how do you do that again if you're Notre Dame? Well, Josh, that sounds weird. Why would they want to do that again? Well, they want to do half of it. They want to find a way to keep Ohio State under 20 points. So that's my starting point here. As I mentioned the other night, Notre Dame, to me, has to find a way to make 20 points win this game. It sounds like a preview from the 60s. It's great. This game could go by in like 2.5 hours. How do they do this? Because they've done it recently. They've held Ohio State under 20 recently. Texas played that kind of game the other day. Now, Ohio State ended up with 28. 7 of those were defensive points. So, right around that 18, 19, 20, 21-point threshold, that's where Texas held Ohio State. Buckeyes still won. Okay, Notre Dame, for all we know, they could hold Ohio State to 19 and lose 19-6. I'm not saying this guarantees anything, but what's the path for them? Okay, clearly, it's in their best interest to hold them 20 or less. I think they have to win the DB wide receiver matchup. So we made a lot, and we continue to make a lot, of how much man coverage Notre Dame plays. Out of all these teams in the playoff, they give more man looks than anyone. No one else has bothered to even try that against Ohio State. I assume that Notre Dame will stick with what got him here. I will also assume that Ohio State will stick with what got him here, and that means Ohio State trusting their receivers to win individual matchups and make plays, and that means Al Golden and Marcus Freeman trusting their guys to win contested balls, to play the ball well in the air, to force receivers to reroute, to get as physical as a group of DBs have gotten with these receivers, to tackle well, so yards after catch at a premium. That sounds good, talking it here. It sounds good. It sounds easy. It's a lot tougher. Ohio State, I don't think, will stop leaning on their strength. So they have just exploded through the air in the postseason. I don't think they'll stop leaning on that, which means if you're going to get it, if they're going to deal their fastball to you, you don't have to knock it out of the park. You at least have to foul it off. I've worked an alarming number of baseball metaphors into the playoff previews lately. No one's pushed back on it, so I'm going to keep on going. You just keep fighting them off. Keep fighting them off, or at least put the ball in play. Because what could happen is it could be a 4-3 put out to end the inning. It could go through the second baseman's legs. It could hit a pebble on the infield. A lot of things can happen. What can't happen is boom, 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 3 gut shots, you're down. We can't have that. So in football terms, that means you can't let happen to you what happened to Oregon on Ohio State's opening drive where, Will Howard hits Jeremiah Smith on, what was it? Man, the stat sheet makes it look like a 70-yard touchdown. No, it was about a 3.5-yard dump pass that went for 70 or so, and that's because they couldn't tackle him. It's hard to do. But you're Notre Dame, so you got to find a way to do it. Also, they've got to affect passes. So this is the other thing that may not play out in a series, but it's got to play out over the span of 4 quarters. The reason Notre Dame is able to win, the reason they're able to come out on top is because they can force turnovers, but they ultimately, you can call it affecting the passer. I just call it affecting the pass because that could be any of a number of things. That could be getting pressure on the quarterback and sacking him. That could be forcing a quicker release. That could be getting your hands up as a defensive lineman in passing lanes. That could be a linebacker that reaches out and has that ball go off the tip of his finger, but it redirects the ball just enough to where it falls in the waiting arms of a safety. You just got to affect passes. And then you let the chips fall where they may. But you can't give up uncontested stuff. You can't suck at tackling. Notre Dame doesn't. And so that is one thing that has to go right for Notre Dame. Now, given all that, even if you do limit them, you will not shut them down. I don't believe anyone will shut Ohio State down. So they're going to get points somehow. You hopefully limit them. But on the other side, you got to score. This is where Ohio State holds all the cards in their hands. Because to me, the most important unit in the game is Ohio State's defensive front, their defensive line. Because they could slam the door on the game. They could shut Notre Dame out. They are good enough to where 17 points on the other side, it's good enough. You just give us 17, you give us 20, we'll shut them down, and we'll deliver the game for you. They have allowed 62 yards rushing per game in the playoff. They have accumulated 16 sacks in the playoff, so they can totally take over this game. Notre Dame's left tackle is out. Notre Dame's got a starting guard who is questionable right now. And even if they were healthy, this is just a tough unit to deal with. So you've got to find ways. I don't care. I mean, Texas did not run the ball statistically great. Grading on the curve, I thought Texas did a halfway decent job in the second half of running the ball. Again, grading on a curve because they put some drives together. They kept falling forward. It wasn't disastrous. It wasn't like Oregon. Oregon couldn't run it at all. Texas ran it well enough to stay balanced. I'll put it that way. Well enough to where it didn't completely get lopsided. Notre Dame, okay, the other thing they need here is they need the explosive play to reemerge. They're number 14 in rushing this year, but it's been kind of limited in the playoffs, which is crazy because they've won anyway. But remember the Indiana game? Love had that big explosive run, but it really hasn't shown up a lot past that. Now, they haven't needed it because they play a very complementary style. And if that shows up again against Ohio State, okay, ignore what I'm saying. I just think it takes a little bit more to beat Ohio State respectfully than it does the other teams you played so far. They need the explosive run to reappear. Don't need 5 of them, but 1 or 2 of them would help greatly. And then, you know what would be a nice bonus there is if Riley Leonard found a couple of more of those 30-plus yard passes like he found last game, because that surprised me a little bit. What do you have, Jesse and Colin? A 54-yard touchdown pass, had a couple of more passes of 30-plus yards. So that'd be nice. Oh, I'll tell you what else would be nice while I have you here. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. I know a lot of you may be watching the preview video, but you don't watch the show regularly. I humbly invite you to. It's free. This is just college football all year. When you subscribe to the channel or the podcast, it doesn't cost you anything. It just helps us, greatly helps us. So appreciate you watching or listening and would appreciate you subscribing. Okay, so the whole middle 8 concept. Producer Jesse and I had an argument today. It's a mild argument. I am of the opinion that anyone who watches college football commentary, NFL commentary, or broadcasts, you've heard the term middle 8 a lot, to the point where people roll their eyes when they hear it. Okay, Jesse thinks most people haven't heard of that concept. So you know what? If you have, bear with me for 2 seconds. If you haven't, that's news to me. Very simple concept. But Notre Dame's owned this category, the middle 8 concept of last 4 minutes before the half, first 4 minutes coming out of the half. And right now, they're on like a generational middle 8 run in the postseason. They lead college football in middle 8 points scored. They lead college football in middle 8 points margin. 2 examples right in your face over the past few weeks. Against Georgia, when they entered the middle 8, so we're talking about 4 minutes or less to go in the first half, coming out of the second half, the first 4 minutes. When that period started against Georgia, it was 3-3. When that period ended, it was 20-3. Notre Dame never looked back. Against Penn State, they trailed 10-0 going into the first part of the middle 8. They are 10-10 tie coming out of it. That is a 27-0 run, their last couple of games in that middle 8 portion. So here is a piece of advice to Ryan Day. I'm not going to give Chip Kelly, Jim Knowles much advice. They don't need it. But one humble, very humble piece of advice to Ryan Day is if you guys win this coin toss, defer. Find a way to take the ball in the second half. Again, that's free. They don't need it. Jerry Emig does not need to send me anything. I don't need Jesse. I don't need you to send them a bill. I'm giving that to our friends in Columbus free of charge. No one calls any penalties against your opponents, so I at least feel like I owe you one free piece of advice. Individual matchups have to be exploited for Notre Dame. Feels like a Notre Dame heavy preview. It's because it is. I think a lot of the default edges go to Ohio State here. I'm not wasting a whole lot of time talking about the edges Ohio State has. They are plenty. So there are many, many paths. If we go back to our old standby analogy of fanning out a deck of cards, and there are 52 of them, and those 52 cards are 52 examples of this game playing out, most of those cards carry an Ohio State win. There are a few of them that have Notre Dame wins, but those cards require many things to happen, or at least a few big things to break Notre Dame's way. One of them, of course, turnovers. To me, that's so obvious, we haven't even put it in the preview. Notre Dame's been great at that. They need it one more time. They did not need it against Penn State. I remember very vividly, you guys don't have to remind me, I remember saying, I don't think you guys can afford to get 2 possessions down and not win the turnover battle. And sure enough, you did both and you won. Well, I'm going to double down on that. I don't think you can afford either of those against Ohio State. You have to, if you don't slow them down, okay, you don't have to shut Ohio State down, find ways to produce some fruitless drives. This is like a grab bag. Notre Dame just needs some of this stuff to come out. Fruitless drives, of course, are either forced turnovers late in the drive or they're turnovers on downs, forced late in the drive. But you can have Ohio State put up 175 on the ground. You can have Will Howard throw for 240, 280. You can have all that happen as long as you got a couple of 9, 10, 11 play drives that result in no points. Or maybe you held them to 3. That's okay. That's a bend but don't break, yes, but that's okay. You can win like that. Special team scores, we've seen it already, would be nice. Tilt the field position heavily in your favor, that would be nice. Penalties are a total wild card in this game because of the aforementioned mind-boggling stat, frankly, for both your teams, but with Ohio State especially. If you missed the other night, 134th out of 134 teams in the country in opponent penalty rate. Nobody ever commits penalties against Ohio State. It's just fascinating. Like game-wrecking defensive linemen right now. 16 sacks in the playoff. 0 holds. No one's held them. No one has so much as gotten hands on an Ohio State defensive lineman jersey. So that plus individual matchups being exploited, there just flat out has to be some edges that aren't glaring that Notre Dame has to find. Before I get to what the model thinks about this game, I know a lot of you are going to this game. Congrats, because that's a wonderful thing. Many more of you want to go to this game. I can only give you advice. If you're on the fence about doing it and you can afford it, do it, because you're buying a memory. You're not just buying a ticket. But I do have very, very good news for you. We wrapped this up right before the show today. I'm going to get you $100 off your ticket purchase. There's no catch on this. You don't have to sign up for anything. You go to SeatGeek to buy your tickets if you're going to buy them. If you're holding out and you're going to buy them, go to SeatGeek. I can't get them to you for free, but use the code PateState100. I am getting you $100 off. Okay, we had to pull some very big strings. Like we had to pull some ropes on this, not just strings. Because as you can imagine, if several of you take part in this, it's a pretty big chunk of change that SeatGeek has left on the table. So national championship tickets, they're there. The market's there right now. It's pricey. I know it is, guys. And if you can't swing it, you can't swing it. But if you are thinking about it, SeatGeek is your place. Pate State 100. You can tell your friends who don't even watch the show. If you're buying tickets, SeatGeek, Pate State 100. Okay, Colin, what does the model think about this game? Because it has been brought to my attention that the Penn State game, the model had Notre Dame winning by 3, and I picked against it. And what was the final score? I don't even want to tell myself. So, are we going to go against the model again here? The FanDuel line right now is Ohio State minus 8.5. Our model is nearly dead even with that. Ohio State minus 8. There is, and you listen to me closely, there is not a Notre Dame fan alive who has interacted with the show that wants me to pick Notre Dame at this point. Probably one of the biggest things they have going for them right now would be if I picked Ohio State to win this game. So I have one of 2 choices, really one of 3 choices. I can follow the model, I can follow my heart, or I can ignore all of it and just go full heel mode and yell "Go Irish" and dance around like Lou Holtz. No one here to catch me, or not Lou Holtz. I wonder what Lou Holtz is doing right now. No, I'm not Lou Holtz. I meant Lee Corso. I could do all those things, but I'm not going to, because as flawed as my heart has been on Notre Dame games, I still have to follow it once more. I think Ohio State's going to win this game. I can't even say it with a straight face. I think Ohio State's going to cover as well. I'm so sorry, Marcus Freeman. I'm so sorry. And I'm saying that in the event that Notre Dame wins this, because no apology will be big enough. I understand already that our reputation as a people of picking Notre Dame games is already in the trash. But if they win the national title, honestly, I don't think that the relationship would be able to be repaired. I don't know. On the other hand, Ohio State could win by 20 here, and all would be forgotten. See, this is the spot we were in last year. Last year, I was on a generational cold streak picking against Michigan, but I made it right at the end. And I picked them to beat Washington, and they did, and no one even remembers it now. No one remembers it. So this is where I'm landing. I'm picking Ohio State to win the game. I'm picking Ohio State to cover. In my mind, this game is like 23-13 or something like that. That's where I see it. And you know I never predict scores. I think that's foolish. It's already hard enough to just pick winners. Don't predict scores. Never do that, kids, except I just did. All right. Academy Sports and Outdoors, one-stop shop. Like I said, I know a lot of you are coming south, and you may not have an academy around every street corner where you're from. They got them in Atlanta. They got them in Atlanta. I know. I'm from Georgia. I know Atlanta very well. We got academy on every street corner. And if it's not on your street corner, you're probably not in the right neighborhood. So that's on you. But Academy Sports and Outdoors has a lot of equipment that could be on you as well. They got a lot of gear that could be on you, a lot of tailgating equipment that could be on you. Now, don't fret, kids. I hear some of you crying already. Mom, Dad, why can't we go to Academy? Well, babe, we don't have one here. Don't let Mom and Dad gaslight you, because you've got the internet. I know you do. That's how you're watching or listening to the show, so that means Mom or Dad could go to academy.com, and if they're shaking their head no, they're lying to you. They could go to academy.com, and you can gear up just like the big boys do who actually have one in their neighborhood. And then a later conversation should be, why are we living in a place where there is no Academy Sports and Outdoors? But I don't want to wreck any homes tonight. I want to make your home better, and Academy Sports and Outdoors can do that. You might be asking yourself, if you're in the podcasting game, is that really the ad copy that Academy paid to have on the show? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Okay, now we got a lot going on. That was the national championship prediction portion of the show, but we got a lot going on, so I do want to get to a lot of this as much as we can. Let me crack open this Zevia here. I knew the mouth felt parched a little bit. Cream soda, man, it just never fails to hit. Straighten the can up. There we go. All right, have you been paying attention? Sorry, I had a little air bubble in my throat. Have you been paying attention to what's happening at Clemson? Dabo Swinney, whole new man. So since we last spoke, they've made a hire there. They hired Tom Allen from Penn State as defensive coordinator. This is pretty big news on its surface, just on its face, but it is monumentally humongous news when you consider the broader scope of things at Clemson. So let me walk you down memory lane a little bit. It wasn't all that long ago that we were looking at Clemson and we were looking at Dabo Swinney, and he basically had no portal tattooed on his lower back and promote from within tattooed on the other half of his lower back. I mean, that was the philosophy there. They famously have not even opened the door of the transfer portal in a long time. And when it came time to hire after Brent Venables left there a few years ago, and Dabo could have done a national search for a coordinator, instead he looked within because he said, I want my own guys. I'm promoting from within. Well, he promoted Wes Goodwin up the ladder. Never been a coordinator before in his life. It was a bad move. He has since fired him. And it's easy to say that in retrospect. That's why I said it at the time. So I get full leeway to criticize it because I did say it at the time. So anyway, now, a few years later, what's happening? A hurricane is coming through Clemson. But Josh, it's January. Well, yeah, climatologically speaking, it's pretty cold over there. But metaphorically speaking, wow. We've all of a sudden got, 3 portal additions here. So we've opened the portal. It's a whole new world, part 1 in Clemson. And then part 2, we're not promoting from within. We're going to get Tom Allen from Penn State. And the Penn State side of that, I'll talk about if Jesse reminds me in just a second. But from the Clemson side of things, what are we getting in here? Well, we're getting a former head coach. We're getting a really good coach, good defensive coach. But more specifically, we're getting new blood. We're getting fresh ideas. It's not stagnant. It's not pond water. There's fresh flow coming in, new players coming in, new coaches coming in. That doesn't guarantee anything. I want to be very, very clear with my opinion on this because I was asked. I love conceptually that Dabo's willing to do this. It doesn't guarantee anything. They could crash and burn doing this, but they could also elevate themselves doing it. Now, Dabo Swinney, this is where he's got to know his program better than anyone, and I trust that he does, and I trust that he knows what he's doing here. He's been doing this a long time. No one knows Clemson football better than Dabo Swinney. Having said that, it signifies a pretty fundamental change here. And you hadn't said those words with Dabo Swinney in a long time. Fundamental change? I've never blamed him. It's been one of the most frequently revisited topics on this show because it's really complex. The Dabo Swinney transfer portal, Dabo Swinney resistant to change conversation. It's been frequent, it's been really complex, and I've always needed 15 minutes to talk about it, so let me do it in 15 seconds. My personal preference has been for Dabo to be a little more open to these concepts. My personal opinion about the man is I fully respect that he's resisted it because I fully respect that he's defined his principles and values of his program and he's adhered to them. Sounds counterintuitive. Kind of is. It's just that you don't have to run your program the way I think you should run it because it's my philosophy that there's a reason you're the head coach there and I'm not. I can have an opinion, just like every fan can have an opinion, but it's your program for a reason. So I've always been smart enough to realize that at least. Now, with all that aside, he is making changes here. Don't mistake what you're seeing is just a headline of, oh, a couple of portal kids, oh, a coaching change. Well, that happens everywhere. Not at Clemson, it doesn't. So this is a really, really big change. I don't know what it means in the end, but I know it signifies Dabo Swinney may not be as stubborn as a lot of folks, including me, thought he was. He may not be as resistant to change as a lot of folks, including me, thought he was. I do think his mind has changed on this. He may hold a press conference and downplay this as just standard operating procedure at Clemson. It's not. This is a fundamental change in their approach. If he says anything other than that, we will agree to disagree on that. They play LSU in week 1 this upcoming season. Do you know that? We're about to wrap up the 2024 season. It's never too early. It's never too early to look ahead. They host LSU. It's not a neutral site thing. This is college football the way God intended it. Sweltering heat, if you can imagine that right now, and Death Valley. Which one? Well, the one they'll be playing in. I just realized that's going to be one of the most nauseating storylines in the week leading up to that game is which Death Valley is the real Death Valley? Just stick an ice pick in my ear right now before we have to go through that. So, hey, we got Cade Klubnik back at Clemson. Garrett Riley, another year in as the offensive coordinator. Now we've got Tom Allen as the defensive coordinator. That thing's not going to be resurrected overnight. That defense is not, but it's got some good players to work with there. I'm just happy to see it. I'm happy to see it. It signifies change. It's not a guarantee of anything, but it does signify change. Keep that up, Colin. 2, 4, 6, 8. They are the 9th odds favorite to win it all next year at FanDuel, for whatever that's worth to you right now. All right, let's move it along. So, now that we've reached the portion of the show where I can read this text from Quick Trip, let's see what they sent me. They sent a question. Jesse, I hate that I didn't tell you this. Tell you what, I'll read the question from Quick Trip. This is real. This is happening live. And maybe we'll answer this on Thursday's show. And Savannah State text right in the middle of it. Okay, I'll read her question later. Quick Trip hit us up and said, does college football need a dynasty or a villain to thrive? Is any school capable of doing that in this era? What a great question by Quick Trip. Also, secondarily, pretty good gas station. You can fuel up for your car. You can fuel up for your very own tummy, your own tank, if you will. And you get a good Theragun there, too. I didn't bring the Theragun into the studio. I forgot about that. Great cold brew on tap. Quick Trip is the fuel provider of the show. They fueled the whole new Saturday tour this past fall. We don't need to do it now, but we do need to eventually get around to naming 2025's tour. And the spring tour. Do you know I spent 84 nights in a hotel this past year? In the calendar year 2024. I'm told we had 365 days. Is that right, Colin and Jesse? Yeah, we had 365. 84 of them in a hotel. Couldn't have done it without Quick Trip. They don't have hotels per se, but they do provide the fuel to get to the hotel. All right, that was a very, very scatterbrained ad read, but it's what you get on this show. I hated USC growing up, and one of you asked about it. From Los Angeles, California, Frisky Dingo hit us and said, us USC fans have always been curious, at what age did your hate for USC begin and what prompted it? Good question. So middle school / high school is where I started hating USC. Now let me make sure, for my friends over on the Peristyle, let me make sure and present this thought as crystally and abundantly clear as I can. I don't hate USC anymore. I love USC. And even if I don't love them, I don't hate them. Does everyone hear that? Okay, most of you ignored it. Oh, got it. Okay, so there was a time in my youth when I was a younger JP, oh yeah, hated USC. So you got to understand the context of my childhood. My childhood is the early 2000s when you have the entire Laguna Beach effect taking place on MTV, and that's overlapping with Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush doing what they're doing at Southern Cal. Pete Carroll in his prime at Southern Cal. And so you have to understand this from the perspective of a kid that is in school, in high school, in rural Georgia. I'm walking the halls of Harris County High School in Hamilton, Georgia, every day. And although I was not a big Laguna Beach fan, several in my social circle were, so I would see it. And even I remember at the time looking and saying, this doesn't seem like the same high school experience I'm having Monday through Friday at Harris County High School. That world out there on the West Coast seems a little different than the world we have in West Central Georgia. Okay, so that was one part of what made me grow a healthy contempt for kids that lived in LA. And then number two, there's this football team out there who is trying to infringe on what we invented. The South invented football. At least that's what I was taught. I mean, there were like extra pages in our Bibles, handwritten, and it basically spelled this out, that the South invented football. That's just the way it is. You might as well etch that in stone. And there's this dude named Matt Leinart, and there's this kid named Reggie Bush, and there are these receivers that look like they were created in a lab. And then Pete Carroll, this dude's coached in the NFL, and now he's killing it at college. But do you understand that now everyone knows that story? But back then, the story was still being written. And for a kid in the South who thinks the South invented football, they were posers. But they never had to play anyone. Now, again, a lot of this is false. But through the eyes of a kid in the South, I'm watching the SEC teams. And I am immersed in the language of SEC culture. And I am bathed in the concept of the SEC schedule being above and beyond anything that you could experience anywhere else in college. So when I'm turning on a Georgia game and they're having to fight tooth and nail against South Carolina, or Florida's got to go into Death Valley and face LSU, that is the pinnacle of college football. Then I turn on the 10:30 game, and like Petros and company are out there covering USC in the Coliseum playing Fresno State or someone like that, and it doesn't even matter, man, that you can allow 40 and you're still going to win because all you got to do is beat Fresno. I had no respect for the Pac-10. I had no respect for the quality of competition out there. I had no respect for the lifestyle because we're blue collar. We're roll up the sleeves in the South. And out there, it's all flash. It's no flex. This is how we felt in the South as kids about kids, including college, on the West Coast. So, Saturday, August 30th, 2003 rolls around. Now, it did not matter if you grew up an Auburn fan or not. That was a big day in the South because we had an entire spring and summer to know that USC was coming to Auburn to open the season. So you've got the whole, they're going to melt in the southern humidity of late August, early September. And Auburn's number 6 in the country to start the season. Southern Cal's 8. So you got a top 10 matchup, Jordan-Hare Stadium, 114 degrees at kickoff. And you're about to, I've got a whole lot of expletive-laden rants that I could go on just repeating what was said around the South about what was going to happen to USC when they came in there. I have the box score in my hand. Southern Cal wins 23-0. That was a tough time. That was a tough time for a lot of people in the South. Now, have there been tougher times? Sure. But guys, this was a different era. Now, I don't know if people think this way. I don't know if the kids who are going to Harris County High School right now think about the West Coast the same way that kids in the South, when I was that age, thought about kids from other parts of the country or lifestyles from other parts of the country. I just don't know. Now, I am blessed enough to where I get to go out to LA all the time. I am around the Pac-12 until it, bit the dust. I'm around all the programs, all the conferences. I understand the way of the world now. I understand the way of college football now. I didn't then. I did not. I did not have the respect I should have had for what Pete Carroll was doing at USC. I didn't have respect for the tradition. Honestly, the only exemption I gave USC was when Fleetwood Mac realigned in 1997, they played a concert called The Dance at Warner Brothers Studios out in LA. And the USC marching band played Tusk with them. Now, I was born long after Fleetwood Mac actually recorded all their hits, but I instantly loved Fleetwood Mac as soon as I could buy a CD when I was a kid. So I always loved Fleetwood Mac. So USC did get an exemption in my mind for that because they were aligned and affiliated with Fleetwood Mac. But other than that, no, I hated USC as a kid. Now, I would give anything. I would pay you money out of my own wallet to have USC in the playoff. I would love to take the Spring Speaker Series out there and sit down with Lincoln Riley. They've never reached out. I would love to do business with USC. I have a little bit of an affinity for USC now. So I've totally flip-flopped. And also, here was really the welcome to a different part of your life moment for me. I don't think I've ever told this story. Jesse, have I told the story of the 2022 title game, the box, the suite? I haven't told that, no. Okay, so I probably hadn't told you this. So we're out in LA for the 2022 national championship game, which was Georgia TCU. And if you remember that game, it was a body bagging pretty early. So we left the field and we went up to what we called the Fox box, which was just a box where a lot of the Fox guys were, because Fox didn't have the game. ESPN had the game, but it's in LA. Fox is in LA, so a lot of their talent were over there. So me and Cannell, and I think Brady Quinn, we went up to the box, watched most of the second half from up there. So we're up there. Leinert's in there. Reggie's in there. Reggie got put in the Hall of Fame that night, I think. And I remember there was a moment where I was sitting there and, periodically, is this still going on? Have they called the fight yet? But I remember there was a vivid moment where I thought to myself, I was standing back there, getting a drink or something like that, and I thought, what would the high school version of you think with who you're hanging out with right now? Not to mention you're in a suite, which is just, because trust me, I didn't change the T-shirt. And they looked at me like I was lost when I walked in there. But what would high school version of you think if he knew not only where you were right now, but who you're with right now? And to be honest, high school version of me may be making a good point. But those are all right guys, as it turns out. Pete Carroll wasn't there that night. But we were turning on TV. SportsCenter would show practice at USC, and there were celebrities there. College football players were not supposed to be celebrities. That was how we were raised. College football players, you can be a celebrity, you can be a college football player. Now, NFL players can be celebrities, but college football players are supposed to be in class, not hanging out with Snoop Dogg and Will Ferrell at practice. It was a different time. It was a much different time. Okay. They're watching us in Colorado Springs, Colorado, Cowan, Tennessee, and Windsor, Ontario, Canada. Thank you guys so much. Wow. This next question, Jesse, do me a favor. Colin, do me a favor. Flip the topics we're about to talk about. I want to do Deion, and then I'll do the Golden Age thing, because there was going to be a lot of overlap otherwise. Okay. I think probably most of you have a working television or internet connection, and you've seen this. But if you hadn't, Johnny hit us from Salida, Colorado. He said, should Deion take the Colorado job? It seems like the right time to move, but he's done such good things for Colorado, and he could go down as a folk hero. No, he shouldn't take the Cowboys job. Let me just be selfish here for a second. Okay, let me stand up for college football. And I hope Coach is listening. No, they would like you there. We love you here. Well, some of us do. But even the ones who hate you, in a roundabout way, love that you're here. So, college football is for Deion Sanders. The NFL, it'll always be there. Look, frankly, if you're cut out to coach in the NFL now, you'll be cut out to coach in the NFL in 5 years. In the meantime, it is my belief, now I'm just talking to us, I'm not talking to Coach anymore, but if he wants to endorse this, he can. It is my belief that Deion Sanders' opinion and his own feeling, his own heart may have changed a little bit on this. It is my opinion that when he got there, I could be wrong on this, but it is my opinion that when he came to Colorado, I think he wanted to see it through until Shedeur went to the NFL. And then come what may. Travis Hunter, see it through until Travis Hunter goes to the NFL. And then come what may. I think in the interim, he has found out that what he does works. They nearly went to the playoff this year. And as much confidence as he had, maybe even he didn't see it going like that. Maybe even he didn't understand that this whole thing could work. And I think in the process, he probably came to love the college game even more than he did when he took the job. I hope I'm right about that, because if I am, his whole viewpoint on this may be different now. His whole viewpoint may have previously been, all right, as soon as they're gone, I'm gone. And now it's, if a job I can't turn down comes along, I'll take it, but I'm in no rush to leave here. I got some more kids coming in that I love. I've handpicked my team for next year, and we're ready to get right back after it in spring practice. Fingers crossed that that's the case, because it is my firm opinion that college football has been better over the last few years because Deion Sanders has been a part of it. This is the entertainment business. It is not the football business. I say this about 4 times a year. I always get immense pushback on it, but I'm right about this. This is not the football business. This is the entertainment business. And under the entertainment umbrella exists football. We have really, really big stadiums because a lot of people are entertained by football. Coaches make a lot of money because those people are that entertained by football that there is immense value in being able to play and coach football at a high level. But all of the value intrinsic to football is stemmed from entertainment, the entertainment value of it. So I love a good, hard-nosed coach as much as the next guy. But I also love a guy like Deion Sanders. Now, he's one of one, but you get my point. So, everyone else is freaking out about this possibility of Jerry Jones and Deion Sanders talking about the Cowboys job. No, that's for someone else. Nope. Old Coach Prime belongs right where he is in Boulder, Colorado. And that's all I have to say about that. All right, next up, a couple of things. The lips are dry, so let me moisten them with coconut pear lip balm, huh? These next couple of questions, I'm telling you, if I wanted to, I could go for 2 hours on just these 2 questions. I probably should take a sip of water before I even start this. The voice is 9/10 of the way back, but we cannot be too careful. Okay, here we go. I want all of you to pay attention because this is going to heavily involve you. In fact, the next 2 segments, these are the ones I talked about at the beginning of the show. These were the ones that occupied a vast majority of our time in production today. Walt hit us up from Pacific Palisades, California. Prayers up for you out there, Walt. We were just out there. The areas that you've seen on the news in Southern California, we were literally just there. Pacific Palisades being one of them. Walt said, would you consider the golden age of college football to be in the past or on the horizon? This is an example of a wonderful question. So, I'm asking you, think about Walt's question. The golden age, you could use any criteria you want. The golden age of college football. Is it back in the black and white TV days? Is it in the 80s? Is it the BCS era? Is it today? Or, and there are many who hold the opinion of what I'm about to say, maybe the golden age is yet to come. Selfishly, I hope you're right about that. I'll tell you what my golden age of college football was. I'm gonna pick a 12-year period. You can do whatever you want to, though. The BCS era was my golden age of college football. I'm going to give you 1998 to 2010, and I'm going to give you my reasons why. Now, I romanticize that era because I was kind of a kid. I was coming of age. I was becoming a young adult in this era. So, I mean, this is middle school. This is high school for me. This is college for me. Yeah, I know. I will grant you that a lot of people look back on that formative part of their life and maybe they romanticize things to be greater than they were. I really don't think I'm doing that here, and I'm going to give you the reasons. Think about this. Out of that 13-year period, there were 11 unique champions in that 13-year period. So 98 to 2010, 11 different champions in a 13-year stretch. Tennessee, Florida State, Oklahoma, Miami, Ohio State, LSU, Southern Cal, Texas, Florida, LSU, Florida, Bama, Auburn. The SEC, on the back half of that part, started their run. But before that, you didn't have the SEC chokehold on the sport quite yet. You also had Keith Jackson on the call. You had Brent Musburger on the call. You were at the latter portions of, to me, the golden age of college football broadcasting. One thing that's very important to me is it was pre-smartphone, which sounds like a bad thing, but it's a great thing from a crowd dynamics standpoint. Go look at some of these championship games. Go look at the 05 game. The 05 game, the Texas USC game, is significant because it may be one of the best college football games ever played, and it's just a vintage moment in sporting lore, but also it's pre-smartphone, which means when you look at the highlights, everyone's eyes are on the action, and you see the flashbolts. It's the flashbolt era. It's people holding up literal cameras and taking a picture, and boy, the picture quality was great from Section 308 that night in the Rose Bowl. I am a believer that the smartphone is one of the greatest inventions in human history. But there have been some downsides. And one of the downsides is there was a vibe pre-smartphone at sporting events and concerts that you could never get back. You can never get it back. And this era was the last era before that. Studio programming hit its pinnacle in this era. And the worst part is, I don't think we realized it. I do not think we fully appreciated what Mark May and Lou Holtz with Reese Davis in a judge's robe Saturday night at 1:30 in the morning truly meant. It was wonderful television, and it couldn't be duplicated, and no consultant group would ever approve that, but it was wonderful. I can understand every third word out of Lou Holtz's mouth. Mark May's eyes have rolled in the back of his head like The Undertaker. It's great. It was wonderful TV, and only after it was gone did I fully appreciate it. Also, the college football video game came of age. Like, that thing was around in the 90s. The early to mid-90s, Jesse, was when they first made it. But look at the advances in the video game. That's when I started to play it, was in the early, mid-2000s. Bowl season was still fully pristine. No one opted out. Some of the best moments of college football postseason in this era are not from BCS games, championship games. They're from non-championship games. It's pre-playoff. I mean, the Fiesta Bowl between Boise State and Oklahoma is just that. It's a BCS game. It's one of the most memorable moments in college football history. Remember the Clowney hit in the Capital One Bowl against Michigan? It's just a New Year's Day game. And by the way, Jadeveon Clowney opting in to play the game. And if you ask him, why are you opting in that era, he would have said, well, what else would I do? It's a football game. We're playing. Oh, it was so great. Also, this is an entirely separate thing. Think about the nature of recruiting in the mid-2000s. This is when Rivals really comes of age. This is when the star ranking system really blows up. This is when recruiting, to me, hits its apex. Now, I don't know what the web traffic numbers are, and the web traffic numbers probably continue to go up, but the spirit and flavor and vibe of recruiting back then was awesome. National Signing Day was a holiday. As far as I was concerned, I mean, I'm not kidding you when I say this now, my year as a college football fan revolved around the season, but there was no day that was more important to me outside of the Saturday of week 1 than National Signing Day. It was more important than the national championship game itself in terms of a day on the calendar. More important than Christmas, more important than any holiday. The first Wednesday in February, I had to have a game plan. I had to either be out of school or I had to be sick and off work. It's non-negotiable. There was like a 10-year run there where I did not do anything on that Wednesday. I was nervous the night before. Recruiting in the mid-2000s, this is pre-transfer portal now. Kids transferred every now and then, but this is pre that. This is, I would say, pre-NIL, pre-you knowing what NIL was. Let me put it that way. Pre-NIL with a head nod from the NCAA. It was so great because, I mean, the kids you were landing, that was going to be your team for the next 4 years. It wasn't like it is now where people say, oh, yeah, you landed him now. Let's see how long you keep him. Back then it was, if you land the class you want, it's the end-all, be-all. If you don't land the class you want, star rankings are overrated. You paid to get the kids. And then, closely behind that, think about the spirit and the nature of NCAA investigations. Do you understand when you saw a headline that someone was under NCAA investigation in 2006, that was like the feds knocking on your door. This was back when people feared the NCAA. Now, some of this may have changed for the better. Now, I'm not fighting that. I'm just saying recruiting and then closely behind that, sometimes a little NCAA investigation. Whew, it was serious stuff. And the star power on the head coaching rosters. You had Pete Carroll and Nick Saban and Urban Meyer and Joe Paterno and Bobby Bowden still around. Stoops was killing it at Oklahoma. Steve Spurrier, Phil Fulmer, Mac Brown won a title in 2005. Jim Tressel won one in 2002. Les Miles ends up winning one in 2007. Frank Beamer was still roaming the sidelines in Blacksburg, yet Chris Peterson exploding onto the scene up at Boise State. Think about how deep the coaching roster was. And the thing about that is, this is not some situation where you have to look back and say, oh boy, all these young up-and-coming head coaches that ended up becoming stars. Those guys were stars then. They were stars in this era. Unbelievable time. That is the golden age of college football for me. Now, you also need to remember, I do not care for the national championship to be the end-all, be-all of college football. If you give me a dynamite regular season, I don't care about the postseason. So if you listen to that and you say, oh, man, I can't get on board with the BCS era because it was so jacked up to have computers deciding a national championship matchup, if you feel that way, you feel that way. I never cared. To me, it was never the worst thing in the world for people to be mad at the end of a college football season. The worst thing in the world would be for them not to care at the end of a college football season. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. All right, let's continue. So that was the first question that took up a majority of our day. That was a really good one. Here's another one. Hayden from Casper, Wyoming. If Pate State is playing one big game, which current broadcasters do you want on the call? This is a problem, Hayden, because I know all these people. So we're going to upset some folks tonight. I know we are. Joel Klatt's exempt from this because he's on probation right now. And so as much as I would have included Klatt in this, I simply can't do it because he's coming for my job. He's coming for the commissioner's job. And that's mine. I called dibs on it. You respect the rule of dibs, don't you, Klatt? So outside of Joel Klatt, for disciplinary reasons, let's do this exercise. You can pretend you have your own fictitious university like I do, but I don't care if you're a Minnesota fan. Just pretend it's Minnesota versus Iowa. Floyd of Rosedale is on the line. Who do we want calling the game? Now, I took this question to mean I could go anywhere and I could take any of the current announcers. They don't have to be on the same team. So I could take one person from here, one person from there. If Pate State is playing a big game this Saturday and I get to put together my fantasy broadcast crew, Joe Tess is on the play-by-play. And I'm going to tell you why. Because Joe Tessitore is the best college football play-by-play man in the sport today. I will get arguments on this. because it's like saying blue is the best color. So I know I will get preference-based arguments on this, and I will listen to you. I have fought you folks before on this. Many of you agree with me, actually. But if you don't, it's okay. But if your reason for thinking that, oh, Joe Tess, man, he's my number one. Oh, I could take him or leave him. Or maybe you just flat out don't like him. And your reason is he's too energetic. What are we really saying there? How do you feel about college football? Now, I don't have the pipes that Joe Tessitore has. But if I called a game, I would sound like him. Because inside me, that's how I feel. Earl Thomas Conley had a country song back in the 80s called Love Out Loud. And the entire thing was about how I suck at telling my girl how I feel. But if she could only know how I sound on the inside, then she would know. Well, that is me with college football. If you could amplify out of my mouth in a broadcast booth the way I'm feeling watching a game on the inside, it would sound like Tess. And I guarantee you a lot of you would be the same way. So I had Will Muschamp say one time, I'd a whole lot rather have to tell a horse, whoa, boy, than have to tell him giddy up. He felt that way about football players. I feel that way about announcers. That's why I got no problem with Gus Johnson. But Joe Tess is my number one. Now, I'm taking Louis Riddick, and I'm putting him in the booth with him. I think Louis Riddick has put on a masterclass this entire season. I've watched a lot of Louis Riddick games this year. For all I know, he could be an NFL general manager tomorrow when the sun comes up. But if he's not, and I've got a big game Saturday, I want Tess bringing the energy, and I want Louis Riddick, because I think he is analyzing the game right now as good as anyone out there. I would also gladly take a Brock Heward. I don't want to go down the list because I'm going to leave someone out. There are a lot of qualified candidates for this job. But I think if I'm running a network and I could do whatever I want, Joe Tess paired with Louis Riddick would be dynamite in the booth. I think their styles would complement each other very well. I am taking my magic wand and I'm reaching down to Homewood, Alabama. It's Kubelik's time. I want two people on the sideline, actually. I low-key think Cole Kubelik's still very underutilized. I would have him on one of my A crews on a network. I would have him do exactly what he's doing. Luganbill does the same thing. I love the flavor they bring. It's an analyst on the sideline. That's really what it is. And I think there's an actual layer added to the broadcast above and beyond just interviews that those guys bring. So I'd actually have Kubelik on the field, and I would take Jenny Dell, and I would put her on the field because I think she's the best in the interview role on the field. So I would have a four-person crew. I would have Joe Tessitore as my play-by-play. I would have Louis Riddick as my lead booth analyst. I would have Kubelik as my sideline analyst. And I would have one Jennifer Dell as my sideline reporter. That would be my booth. I wish, by the way, so when I'm college football commissioner, I'm going to do this entire show coming up in a few, I don't know, days, weeks, we'll see. But one thing I wish I could do, if I could just rip the entire thing apart and start from scratch, is I wish the college football broadcast model operated totally different than it does. Right now, it's CBS has a deal with the Big Ten. ESPN has a deal with the SEC. And, like, you kind of know if you're a Big Ten fan, you're going to get one broadcast team on the A game for that league the whole year, especially if you're an SEC fan right now. If you're getting the number one broadcast, you're going to get Fowler and Herbstreit. You're going to get that, and you're going to get that all year because ESPN has a deal with your conference. Not that there's anything wrong with those guys. What I'd love to do is I'd love to take the entire model and tear it down. And I would love to have the networks draft every week. So I would love to have all the games on the table, and I would love to have sort of a snake draft where CBS picks the number one game this week, and then NBC gets it, and then Fox gets it, and then ESPN gets it, or whatever. But they are drafting games, and then they send their broadcast crew to do those games. But here's the catch. There is no stipulation on what you can and can't draft. So Fox could step up and take the number one SEC game, and then CBS could send Gary and Brad out to Eugene, Oregon to do a game, and then Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt could be down in Gainesville doing a game, and then the next week they could be in Minneapolis doing a game. I would love for it to work that way. I don't think that's in the cards, but you know what? It's a Tuesday show in January, so we can talk about whatever we want to. All right, so I have some news for you. The news is not that we are partnering with FanDuel, because we've partnered with them all year. They are the exclusive odds provider of the show. We appreciate them. I think that goes without saying. I was looking around. I was perusing, if you will, earlier today, and I was looking at some of the prop bets for the national championship game. You know, if you're an Ohio State fan and you think you're just about to punk Notre Dame, you can bet no Notre Dame touchdowns at a pretty fair price right now. I just want to let you guys know that. You got alternate spreads. If you think you're going to blow them out, you can lay more than 8.5 at a much better number. Also, if you don't care about the national championship game at all, like, wow, what a calloused way to enter 2025. But you do you. Anyway, if you don't care about that at all, they do have the odds to win the 2025 national championship up. Now, that means the game that would be technically played in 2026. But I believe we're playing the 2024 title game this coming Monday night. I don't care that the calendar is going to say we're 20 days into 2025. So, anyway, long way of saying you can bet odds on next year's national championship already on FanDuel. Exclusive odds provider of the show. All right, we had one more question I wanted to get to. I need to be nice about this, but I need to be stern. Tennessee. Ryan from Adamsville, Tennessee hit me up. He said, Vol fan here. I'm glad Josh Heupel has raised the floor of this team, but here's where the question goes downhill. The ceiling seems far away with how Nico and the passing offense looked towards the end of the year. Am I overreacting? I'm not sure how I feel about 2025. Okay, do you see on the screen right there, when it says but, then most of the question was after but? I don't think we need to just rush through that first part. I'll get to the second part, but need I remind everyone, Heupel's gone 11-2, 9-4, and 10-3. The last time you won double-digit games before he got there was 2007. Between 2007 and Josh Heupel taking over, you missed a bowl 7 times. From 2008 to 2021, they missed a bowl game. That means 5 wins or less, 7 different times. So, yeah, I'd say he raised the floor a little bit. I would say it is a very safe assumption. It's a very safe conclusion. I wadded the paper. I was so emphatic. That, yeah, Josh Heupel, he's raised the floor just a little bit around there. Tennessee was bad, man. They sucked for a long time. And now we're worried because they went 10-3. How we're grading on a curve all of a sudden in Adamsville, Tennessee. Now, I am kidding because I care. But you're looking at the number 1 offense 2 years ago, number 9 rushing offense this year, number 6 total defense this year. Heupel's never called a defensive play in his life. He has greatly elevated the collective level of the program, level of play on the field, level of spending in NIL is pretty top-notch right now. I would say about the ceiling that, yeah, I think there's still a ways to go for them to hit their ceiling as well. That's a good thing when you just went 10-3. And there's no guarantee they're going to hit it this upcoming year, mind you. There's a chance we're wrong. There's a chance the ceiling's not as high as we thought it was. But remember, you can't get much better than this. And here's another thing, just a thought exercise. Keep everything about Tennessee the same. Keep everything about Nico the same. Give Tennessee Penn State's draw in the playoff. Have them play SMU in Knoxville, win. Have them go to Glendale to face Boise, probably win that one too. Tennessee's the one in the semifinals against Notre Dame. And, of course, that's not the way football happens. What I'm saying is we wouldn't have actually changed anything about the program. It would just be that they didn't get served up as a sacrificial lamb to Ohio State in the first round. Someone else did. You'd feel a lot different. You'd feel a whole lot different about Tennessee. And in reality, I didn't just change a thing about the program. So the recency bias, the last thing you saw was them get splattered by a team that went on to, splatter the number 1 team in the country and who, for all we know, may end up splattering Notre Dame. Less likely, but could happen. What I'm saying is there's no shame in losing to the eventual national champ, especially when you're badly banged up like Tennessee was. So they got work to do. They know that. But man, Tennessee football matters again, and they did not matter on the national scene for a long time. I need to go home and eat, and I'm sure you guys have something to do as well. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the podcast. Numbers are awesome. We always appreciate it. Onward and upward. We'll be back here same time Thursday night. Until then, for Director Colin, producer Jesse, I'm Josh Pate. Take care, and God bless.